So welcome everyone. I hope those of us who are living in this area, in our area, Washington area, been enjoying the cicadas. I think we've gone past the peak now. It seems like we might be in the kind of the later phases of it. Probably the heavy rain may have done them in, but I've really enjoyed them, and really love that sound of that wall of sound, you know, of millions of them reaching out for love. Um, so welcome everyone, welcome back, and welcome to anyone who's new and coming for the first time. I'm Hugh Byrne, and this is weekly classes being offered by the Insight Meditation Community of Washington, IMCW, and the Center for Mindful Living, which is many of us are a part of, which is a part of the larger IMCW community, and we'll be sharing info about upcoming events. You can go to living-mindfully.org to check that out, but check the links at the end. So welcome everyone. What we've been doing, well, what we did last week was we began with a short meditation, and then had a talk, and then a bit longer meditation. This week we'll have the movement as well, and time permitting, we'll do some sharing in groups. If not, we'll do sharing in the full group. And the theme for today of the talk today will be what are called the three characteristics of existence. You know, anyone who's been to a retreat will probably be familiar with these, known as anicca, dukkha, and anatta in the Pali language: impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and not self. So I'll be kind of exploring these teachings from the standpoint of from the standpoint really of meditation, and how these can be really a way of looking that is liberating, that is freeing. And I'll explain that a lot more when we have the talk. So what I'd invite us to do, just to kind of take a few minutes at the beginning to arrive and settle. So you might come into a comfortable posture, take your seat. You think of the the archetype of the Buddha sitting under the tree of awakening. If you like, you can close your eyes, let your attention come inward. Just invite your attention to drop down out of the thinking mode where we spend so much of our time, down into the body. Feel the body. Feel the contact with the seat beneath you, whatever you're touching in contact with. Feel the contact of your feet with the floor, your hands with your lap or your knees, whatever they're touching. Letting yourself arrive and settle. Relaxing the shoulders, letting the chest be open so you can breathe easily. Making any small adjustments to be as comfortable, relaxed as you can be. You might take a few longer, deeper breaths to help you settle, arrive, be here. Nice full deep in breath and a long slow out breath. Breathing in, calming the body, and breathing out, calming the mind. And just letting the breath be as it is, letting it come back to its natural rhythm whenever you're ready. You might invite a smile or a half smile to the face, to the corners of your eyes and the corners of your mouth. Perhaps thinking of a loved one, someone who makes you feel happy or joyful. A smile helping us calm the body and the mind and the nervous system. Just taking this time to be here as fully as you can be. I'll share Martha Postlethwaite's poem Clearing, creating a space in our lives. She says, do not try to save the whole world or do anything grandiose. Instead, create a clearing in the dense forest of your life and wait there patiently until the song that is yours alone to sing falls into your open, cupped hands and you recognize and greet it. Only then will you know how to give yourself to this world, so worthy of rescue. So we can think of this time as creating a space, creating a clearing in the busyness, in the dense forest of our lives, and just waiting to see what arises out of the stillness and the silence, the quiet. Perhaps some wisdom or insight, some kindness, compassion. We can then go back into our lives with, perhaps with a more open heart, or more clarity, more insight. So inviting an open-hearted awareness to whatever is present right now. So if you can meet what's here with kindness and with acceptance. Whatever bodily feelings, emotions, mind states, thoughts are present. See if you can make space for them. Let them come, let them go. Let your awareness be relaxed and at the same time open and aware, alert. And your effort be balanced. Chogyam Trungpa said, there's no need to struggle to be free. Ending the struggle is itself freedom. Ending the struggle is itself freedom. So much of our practice is ending the struggle, in the struggle of the wanting or the pushing away or the checking out. Just to bring an open-hearted acceptance to what's here right now, this moment without judgment. Just notice what's calling for attention right now. Seeing if you can meet whatever feelings, whatever sensations or emotions, mind states are present. What happens when you don't get tangled in them, but you let them come and go? You could use the breath as an anchor for your awareness, if that's helpful. Just being aware of breathing in, breathing out. In breath and out breath. And coming back whenever the mind moves into thought. Just kindly and gently letting the attention come back. Come back to the body, come back to the breath. Finish with this poem by Richard Schiffman called Smart Cookie, after Wallace Stevens. The fortune that you seek is in another cookie, was my fortune. So I'll be equally frank. The wisdom that you covet is in another poem. The life that you desire is in a different universe. The cookie you are craving is in another jar. The jar is buried somewhere in Tennessee. Don't even think of searching for it. If you found that jar, everything would go kaflooey for 1,000 miles around. It's the jar of your fate in an alternate reality. Don't even think of living that life. Don't even think of eating that cookie. Be a smart cookie. Eat what's on your plate, not in some jar in Tennessee. That's my wisdom for today, though I know it's not what you were looking for. So feeling us together here in community. So that poem was Smart Cookie by Richard Schiffman? Richard Schiffman. So welcome everyone if you joined us a little bit after the beginning. I'm going to share a few reflections today on what are called the three characteristics of existence. They're kind of very well known in the Buddhist teachings and Buddhist tradition. They're often seen as kind of the nature of reality, although I think there's a kind of a better way of looking at them, which is what I'm going to talk about today. And these three basic characteristics are practices for letting go of clinging. I'll just name them. First of all, the three characteristics are impermanence, and that's the Pali word is anicca, A-N-I-C-C-A, anicca, impermanence. The second is unsatisfactoriness, could be suffering. The word is very familiar, the dukkha, which is often translated as suffering, but is, I think, a better kind of framing is unsatisfactoriness, a feeling of things not being the way we want them to be. Suffering often has kind of much larger connotations of, tragedy and a whole range of different things. So unsatisfactoriness. And the third, non-self, sometimes not self, and that's anatta, A-N-A-T-T-A. And I'll be exploring these as really as ways of looking at our experience and looking at phenomena that can help free us from suffering. And I've spoken in recent times. I've been influenced a lot by a teacher who I've mentioned here on occasions, Rob Burbea, B-U-R-B-E-A, who died just over a year ago of cancer in the UK. And I've listened to many of his talks and been very influenced by his teachings. And one of the things he talks a lot about is ways of looking at our experience, particularly ways of looking at our experience that lead to freedom. And I want to just, before jumping into talking about before getting deep into these three characteristics, just talk more generally about ways of looking. We adopt throughout the day and throughout our lives, many ways of looking at reality, or you might say reality in quotes, looking at our experience, looking at phenomena, looking at the world, many of which don't lead us to happiness or well-being or freedom. For example, if you looked at the world through a hostile or a greedy way of looking, let's say your kind of way of looking at the world, your understanding of the world, your kind of framework for looking at life and others is, let's say, it's a dog-eat-dog world. You've got to get whatever you can in any way you can. If anyone gets in my way, then too bad for them. It's really a zero-sum game, and there are winners and losers, and I want to be a winner rather than a loser. This kind of mentality is kind of an extreme version. Hopefully there aren't people around like that, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. But certainly there, we can have these kind of views of the world. Another kind of more everyday one might be a self-judging view, a self-judging way of looking at ourselves, in this case, our experience. I can't seem to get anything right. I can't seem to succeed. Everything I do goes bad. Even when I, beat myself up, I still seem to fall short. That kind of mentality. Does that resonate with anybody? Anyone heard of that? There's a lot of self-judgment around. Maybe that's an extreme version of it, but but just that sense we've often through our early years, through our childhood, from our parents or caregivers, you got to do better, if you're going to get what, if you're going to succeed, etc., you've got to do better than that, and don't do that. And we can internalize these views, and they can become quite negative. You can think of ourselves as a worthless or a loser or whatever. That could be our way of looking at our experience, at our life, or at the world. Or it could be we look at the world, our way of looking is one of comparing ourselves with others. Oh, they're much better than I am. Oh, they know much more than I do. Or comparing ourselves in a way of, oh, I know better. I'm much better than them, at least. It can be higher, lower, or even the same. It's still the comparing mind. And the Buddha talked about that, how painful the comparing mind is. And we all kind of do that, I think, to a lesser or greater extent. We want to, it seems to be a kind of a basic human thing. We want to, see if we're accepted in our community, how we're doing, and we're living up to expectations. But we can certainly overplay that, so it leads to a lot of suffering. We can be like, keeping up with the Joneses, all the ways we're kind of wanting to be better than and not be worse than, etc., be richer than, more advanced than, etc. That would be another way of looking at the world. All of these I mentioned won't lead to our happiness or well-being. It's like we're looking at the world through a clouded lens. that prevents us from seeing things clearly, certainly prevents us, gaining, achieving any real happiness or well-being, because we're in that state of like, how am I doing? Am I doing well enough? Am I better? Or I'm never good enough, So it's like, I think of it, and I've spoken of it before, as like kind of putting on a pair of glasses, a pair of, glasses that, maybe are clouded so you can hardly see anything, or you could put on, as people often talk about, rose tinted, you see everything with a kind of more glossy, nicer look. I mean, and what we're doing much of the time is we are adopting ways of looking, and some of them are very pervasive and very entrenched. Some of them are they're almost like the blueprint of our life. This is how I look at the world. I look at the world as a win or lose place, and then anything I do is going to be affected by that. My intentions are going to be affected by that. If I think of this world, let's say, as a hostile place, that, survival of the fittest, I've got to get what I can. If I don't, somebody else will have it. Then that's going to color everything I do, isn't it? It's going to color my intentions. My intentions are going to be get what I can, kick the other person out of the way if they're competing with me, that kind of thing. It's going to affect my actions and my speech, that will be, it'll affect, my effort, the effort I make, will my effort be, wholesome or unwholesome? In that case, it will tend to be unwholesome. It'll be, create separation, create division between self and other. So these kinds of ways of looking lead us to suffering, lead us to unhappiness, don't lead us to freedom. So it's really important for us, I think, to be aware of what is our framework, what are our ways of looking, and most important, do they lead to happiness and well-being, or do they lead to suffering? Because we could adopt, many different ways of looking at the world, looking at ourselves, looking at life, looking at experience. And, in a way, they're neutral. They're ways of looking. They're not the truth in themselves. But what's important is that they can either lead to good or to harm. Some of them will lead to very positive outcomes. Whatever happens in our life, whatever, may come out of, the universe, that's unexpected, we can be sure if we adopt particular ways of looking, that they will lead to our well-being and our happiness. So, for example, the Buddhist way of looking, the Buddhist teachings as a whole operate, I think, as ways of looking, lenses to look at our experience and to guide our experience and guide our life. And they are ways of looking that, with training, can help us lessen and ultimately end suffering in our lives. So, for example, the Buddha's central teaching, the Four Noble Truths, is, I think, most helpfully seen as a lens or a way of looking at our experience that, when followed in practice, can lead us to the end of suffering. It's a simple, set of propositions, if you like. It says, is there suffering? Is there suffering? Am I experiencing suffering right now? In any moment, it's a question, am I experiencing suffering? That's the way of looking, first of all, to see if there's suffering. Do things feel unsatisfactory right now? Now, I'm looking around at the Hollywood squares and everybody seems to be comfortable. You know, you're not being tortured, you're not lying out in the rain and you know, being bitten by a dog or anything. Everybody looks pretty well, but that doesn't mean, you know, you might be experiencing some unsatisfactoriness. You know, you could be saying to yourself, yeah, he said that a few times, you know, he's repeating himself now. You know, oh, come on, why doesn't he get to the point? Not that anyone hopefully would say that. Maybe they would, that's fine. That it's a way of looking. We could be experiencing suffering at any moment. You know, even you know, on a Greek island, or you know, whatever our situation might be, a very externally very pleasant, but nonetheless we experience, because we're worried about, you know, what's going to happen in the future. We're anxious, or we're feeling bad about conversation we had with somebody. We could be in a very comfortable situation, but we could be very, very unhappy in the present moment. So the Buddha asks, you know, is there suffering, first of all? And then asks, what is my role in my suffering? What is my role in my suffering? What am I holding on to or resisting or avoiding or trying to get away from that is contributing to my suffering? Because the Buddha's teachings say suffering isn't just a happenstance. If we're suffering, then we are in some fundamental way implicated. And I don't mean that in a blaming or a judging way. I'm just saying implicated, that there's something that we're doing or not doing that is not skillful. Without that unskillfulness, there wouldn't be the suffering. There might be pain, there might be, quote, bad things happening, but it wouldn't be suffering without that, you know, that something that we're not seeing about our own role in the creation of the suffering. So that's the second of the noble truths, to see where, you know, what our own role is in our suffering. And then when we see that we are implicated in it, it's because I'm resisting my experience that I'm experiencing this suffering right now. That I can see that, then I can if I can see that, then I can let go. And then there's a sense of, you know, a sense of lessening of of contraction, maybe more of a sense of ease and well-being from that letting go. This is the abandoning of clinging or craving, and the outcome of that is freedom. You know, what the Buddha talked about as nirvana or nibbana, the complete ending of suffering. But maybe we don't end suffering completely, but we can let go. Maybe if we let go a little, we can experience a little freedom. Probably heard me say that, or other people say that from Ajahn Chah. Let go a little and you'll experience a little freedom, a little peace. Let go completely and you'll experience complete peace. Your struggles with the world will be at an end. And then the Buddha provides a path of training in meditation, in cultivating ethics or virtue, and in cultivating wisdom, what's called the Noble Eightfold Path. That's the way to the end of suffering. So this is a way of seeing. This is a way of looking at our experience that helps us gain greater freedom, achieve greater freedom and happiness. We can look at other specific Buddhist teachings in the same way. We can look at the simple practice of mindfulness that we do in meditation, letting experiences come and go without judgment, without clinging. When we do this, it helps us. We may find, I'm sure you've found, it can help us experience some ease, some well-being. You know, you notice you're contracted because you're resisting, you know, like, oh, I want this to be different. And then you say, okay, can I just relax? Can I just be with this feeling? Okay, noticing I when I do that, there's some openness, there's some space, there's some calm, perhaps some ease. Not saying every time. We may be really caught up in a strong attack of suffering. You know, we may be holding on tightly. may be hard to let go. But this practice of letting go, brings us greater ease, excuse me, greater well-being, greater happiness. In the same way, if we cultivate loving kindness or compassion, these two are ways of looking at our experience. We're adopting a particular lens to look at ourselves, others, and the world. We're seeing people through the eyes of love, connection, compassion, rather than through the eyes of hostility or indifference. Excuse me. When we practice loving kindness or compassion or equanimity, we're consciously adopting a way of seeing, a way of looking, where we consciously invite open-hearted, caring, compassion, friendliness to ourselves and to others. So we're consciously adopting a way of looking at kind of a lens through which we look at everybody. We look at people, and rather than seeing this bad person doing this bad thing, we see this is another suffering human being, and that we can extend to them our compassion because we've adopted a way of looking. That way of looking can be our way of life after, with enough training of the heart and the mind. But that's essentially what we're doing when we cultivate any of these practices. We're cultivating a way of looking at our experience through the framework of the teachings that will help to lessen suffering and to cultivate well-being and happiness. In doing that, we lessen the creation of self, of a separate self, which when we get caught up in clinging and craving and aversion, then we're creating a sense of a separate self. Not that there is one, but we're kind of creating a self and other. I want this, but this person maybe get in the way of me getting it. So in cultivating these teachings and practices, we're lessening the fabrication, the creation of a separate self. We're lessening the creation of suffering, and we're cultivating well-being. The Buddha's teachings on these three characteristics, on impermanence, on unsatisfactoriness, and not self, are familiar ones in the Buddhist world, as I've mentioned. They're often kind of framed almost like as a philosophy. Everything is impermanent, nothing can be clung to, and there's no self to which all this is happening. As though this is like, well, this is how the world is. And then, looking at the world in this way, you can experience greater happiness, greater freedom. But when we look at the world, when we look at it almost as a philosophy, then we can get into, debates about, well, particularly about not self. Well, what does it mean that we don't have a self? And why did the Buddha say that we don't have a self? He didn't, actually. So I think better than looking at it as a philosophy or an ontology, a kind of a way of looking at the world and at being, we can look at it. I think a better way of looking at it is as a lens through which, or a way of looking through which we can explore our experience. And rather than getting into the question of, is there a self or not a self, as a kind of philosophical question, which I don't find a very helpful philosophical question, we can actually explore it ourselves as a meditation practice, and to invite ourselves to see, when we're getting hooked on something, see, okay, not me, not mine, not me, not mine. Is this way of seeing, helping me to let go, to find greater well-being, greater happiness, and letting go. So if we take the first of these three, anicca, first of these three characteristics, impermanence, it can be very helpful to reflect on impermanence, how, you know, if you were listening to a Dharma talk on impermanence, you probably, you know, the teacher would probably talk about, you know, the cosmos and 14 billion years of you know, history. Sorry, I've got a lump in my throat. And how even the mountains and the rocks and the planets will come to an end. You know, that everything is impermanent, and if we can see this impermanence, that we can let go. We can let go of clinging, and we can look at impermanence on a more day-to-day level. Think about your emotions today and how you're feeling now. Is that the same as you felt when you woke up this morning? Was it the same as when we began our class today? Will it be the same when you go to bed tonight? You know, the likelihood is that all of us will go through kind of waves of, you know, at times we might get caught up in feeling sad about somebody, we're missing somebody. Another time we might be, you know, out in nature and feeling very spacious, and, you know, that we'll experience probably a lot of different emotions and mind states. And if we look at that, it can help us to let go, as, you know, rather than thinking, oh, you know, today is this solid experience. It's either a great day or it's a terrible day. It's, you know, either good or bad. Well, it's like a flow. It's all changing. Everything is constantly changing. You can bring your awareness. You can bring awareness to your experience in meditation. You can pay attention to your breathing and look at it through the lens of impermanence, even right now. Just experiencing the breath coming and going, changing, continually changing, just the impermanence of the breath. You can't hold on to any breath. No breath can be held on to. It's just a flow, completely flowing, changing, impermanent. Same with the bodily sensations. Notice how they change, how your emotions come and go, express themselves and then pass in time. Using this lens of impermanence, we can loosen identification really with all aspects of our experience. We can see it all as anicca. It's all coming, going, changing, impermanent. So rather than a teaching about how things are impermanent, they can be looked at, our experience can be looked at. It can become a way of looking. This teaching of impermanence can become a way of looking that helps us untangle ourselves from clinging. You know, we can see, okay, I'm feeling tight now. Okay, can I just see this as part of the change that is an inherent part of life? Every moment of life is changing, moment by moment. Body is changing, emotions are changing, moods changing, life around us is changing. And as we really, in a reflective and a meditative way, kind of dance with that change, then it can help us untangle ourselves. When we do get caught up, we can see this too is impermanent. You know, this mind state that I'm caught up in now because, you know, I said something and I regret it and I'm judging myself for it now. Okay, how is it to just bring impermanence, the reflection of impermanence, so that this will come and go? We know if we think of all the emotions that we've had in the past. They've all ended, you know, and if we've worked with them wisely, we can let them go. If we keep holding them, oh, I remember that thing I did when I was 5 years old. I still feel bad about it, you know. I mean, yeah, well, they were carrying it around with us, but do we need to? And is it helpful if we do? And we can do the same with the second of these characteristics of dukkha, unsatisfactoriness. Look at our experience through this lens, with our breath, our body, our emotions, our thoughts, the sounds around us. None of them can be clung to. They're all impermanent, they're all changing. And in changing, this is an aspect too of their unsatisfactoriness. You know, they can't be clung to because they're constantly changing. Both the pleasant is changing, the unpleasant is changing, the neutral is changing. And when we see all of our experience through this lens, we can find freedom in the midst of this changing, unclingable to world. It doesn't mean we don't care about the world. It doesn't mean we don't love it less, or it doesn't mean we love it less. We can see everything coming, you know, the way in Japan, you know, and here as well, I think people can really love the cherry blossoms. And one of the things, you know, that in a way they have, you know, a poignancy to them because they're so ephemeral, you know, because they just last for a short time. I mean, I feel the same with the cicadas, you know, particularly when it'll be 17 more years. And how old are we going to be in 2038? You know, and kind of thinking about that, thinking about our life, you know, it kind of does bring on impermanence. How old will I be? How old will you be in 17 years, in 2038, when the 17-year cicadas come around again? And it's a useful reflection, not to as a negative thing in any way, but just as a reality of life, the impermanence of life, the changing nature of life, the unsatisfactoriness in that none of it, that even the beauty can't be held on to, and the more painful comes and goes too. So that we can find peace and joy and happiness in this changing kaleidoscope of experience. So it doesn't mean impermanence or unsatisfactoriness makes life gray, dull, meaningless. It can actually enhance life because we appreciate it more fully because we know it doesn't last forever. You know, if it lasted forever, maybe we could take it for granted, but nothing lasts forever. And so, you know, this relationship that I might be in, you know, you might be in a relationship, loved ones, all of it's going to come to an end. Can we hold this in an open-hearted way, knowing that that everything has to be let go of? Can that be a source of acceptance, a source of wisdom and of compassion and of connection? You know, that we know our loved ones, we're not going to, you know, we'll leave them or they'll leave us at some stage, sometime that will happen. Can we, in the midst of that, experience, you know, can that even deepen our love and connection for them, knowing that, you know, not being a source of, you know, isn't this awful? But it's the way life is, this changing life. And we can use this lens as well for the third of these characteristics of what's called not self, or anatta, as a liberating practice. This is the one of the three I think that practitioners often have the most difficulty with, because we all have a sense of self, don't we? You know, it's kind of, okay, yeah, I know this is me, you know, I've experienced being with this being for, you know, decades, and I'm familiar with myself. There's a kind of a familiar sense of self that we have, this body, this mind, this personality. So what does it mean to say, not me, not mine? What's interesting, I mentioned this, is that the Buddhist never said there is no self or there is a self. When he was asked if there was a self or is there no self, he would stay silent and not respond, because those are kind of philosophical questions. And he wasn't interested in making philosophical or, statements about the nature of being or reality. What he was interested in was helping his followers and those who followed on find freedom from suffering in their lives. And his awakening came from a radical understanding that nothing has a separate, inherent existence. Everything arises out of causes and conditions. This is what he taught as dependent origination or codependent arising. And I want to just give one example of this. One of the most kind of maybe most important ways this teaching, this understanding of dependent arising can be seen is when, let's take, for example, we witness somebody doing something harmful, maybe in the political world, they're doing something that we really disagree with. And we react with anger and judgment. And when we do that, we experience, if we're honest about it, we experience suffering. We create separation, this bad person, they're terrible, they're always doing this, it's going to cause such harm to all these people. When we do that, we'll experience suffering. This is because what we've brought to that experience, to that, hearing or seeing this thing this bad thing that's happening, we've looked at it really through the lens of how we believe things should be, of really through the lens of judgment. But if we were to look at this same action through the lens of loving kindness and compassion, as well as a commitment to do whatever we can to respond to the harm that's being caused. So I'm not saying that that's irrelevant, but if we bring loving kindness and compassion to that same situation, then the feelings and emotions that arise would be completely different. Does that make sense? That if I hear this and see this, but what I'm looking at it through is a lens of kindness and compassion and understanding, my experience will be completely different in this second situation. My suffering or non-suffering arises codependently, depending on the causes and the conditions and my response. So they go together. So the original condition, let's say that stays the same, the person doing what I think is the harmful thing, met with anger, judgment, resentment, out comes suffering. That's what comes codependently out of these two conditions. Maybe there's other conditions as well, probably are, but these two main conditions. But in the second situation, that same original thing, the harm being caused, met with loving kindness and compassion, has a completely different outcome. It's understanding, it's compassion, it's kindness, it's caring, it's maybe forgiveness, maybe commitment to do something as well, but it's a completely different thing. It's a codependent arising. Each of those depend on there's not just one solid thing. Everything arises codependently, depending on other conditions coming together. And when I see this, I can see I create in the second situation much less of a sense of a separate self, that comes from clinging to my views. And in the second situation, I'm not there's much less suffering. There may be some suffering, some contraction, but much less suffering than the other situation. So when in our practice, we can look at all of our experience through the lens of not self, anatta. We watch the arising of experiences. We can see the joy and peace, the anger, the wanting, the sensations, the emotions, and see them as not me, not mine. So essentially, these three characteristics become really the lens or the way of looking at our experience that either leads to well-being and happiness or leads to suffering. So which of these lenses, which of these ways of looking will we bring to any situation, will we bring to our life as a whole? And the invitation of the Buddha's teachings is to use these understandings of the Four Noble Truths and the teachings, the heart practices, teachings of mindfulness and compassion, all of these teachings and practices as our lens through which we look at our life day to day, our relationships with others, our work, what's going on in our world. If we can see things through this lens, then it will take us to freedom from suffering, a lessening of freedom from suffering, and the potential, the Buddha said, for ultimate, complete letting go of suffering. Our struggle with the world will be at an end. So what I would like to do in a while is to do a meditation, kind of looking at these characteristics. But what we'll do, since we've been sitting for an hour, is invite Emily to lead us in some movement, and we'll do a little bit of sharing together and then come back for a meditation. Thank you, Emily.
Let me invite you all to stand up and sway from side to side, and then open your arms, engaging with a much bigger space, expansion, feeling your body in this wider space. And then come to center, take a deep breath in, lifting your head and chest. Raise your arms up higher and gather the energy there. The sun, the clouds, blue sky, and bring that energy to your heart. And then gather the energy of all of us together in community, the love, compassion, and tenderness we feel, and bring that in. And then gather the energy of the earth, that which provides so much abundance, including peaches this spring. I love peaches. And then bring your arms out into scarecrow arms. Exhale, lower. Inhale up. Exhale, lower. Inhale up. One more time. Exhale down. Inhale up, and then rise up. Clasping your left wrist in your right hand, maybe a little, have your feet a little wider. Inhale, reaching up, and exhale, tilt over to the right, allowing the lengthening of your side. Deep breath into that left rib cage. Soften with the exhale. And then inhale back to center. Switch wrists. Exhale over to the left. Leaning, enjoying. Deep inhale into the right rib cage. Exhale, soften here, finding a new place. And back to center. Float your arms down, move your shoulders independently for your own little dance of the morning. And then clasp your hands behind your waist. Inhale, lifting your head and chest. Exhale, lower your hands down, drawing your arms together, and release back to the waist. Inhale, lifting your head and chest. Exhale, draw your hands down and back to the waist. Then release your arms, roll your shoulders together. Roll them the other way. And then place your hands above your knees to come into a flat back, allowing your hips to reach out beyond your heels, lengthening your spine out. And exhale, allow your head to drop down and your shoulders, whatever feels right for you today. Lowering, feeling the pull of gravity as you come into a forward fold, bending at the hip crease. And now press on your hands, press on your feet. Bring your hands up to your knees and roll up your spine, placing your hands at heart center to release to the sky, release to the world, and to the earth. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Emily. Lovely, lovely, as always. Thank you. Please feel free if you would like to share anything about whatever has come up for you today in the meditation or in the talk or in the small group. You can share that in the chat. I think what I'd like to do is to do a meditation where we incorporate a little bit of the practices from the talk. And if folks have questions, please put them in the chat. And if there's time, we'll address one or two. We'll answer that question for you, Francine. It's on the IMCW website where you can find them, and hopefully we can give you a link before the class is finished for the recordings of the classes.
Thank you.
Sure. So let's sit again. You might let your attention come inward, close your eyes. Inviting any area of the body where there may be tension to relax and soften. Could take a few deeper breaths. Just settling into being here. And just open to what is present right now, what's arising for you. Anything you notice in the body. Any emotions or mind states. Just inviting a receptive awareness to whatever is here. Is it possible to see the the ever-present changing of experience. Feelings come and go. Sounds come, stay for a bit, and then go. Thoughts come. They last for a little while. If we get caught up in a story, they may go on a little longer. But if we notice, then they can dissolve, just fade. We see the impermanence, the change in all these experiences, this moment to moment, coming and going. What happens when you look at your experience through this lens of impermanence, of change? Does it open space? It may not in this moment. There may be some resistance, or the mind may be caught up in something. Just inviting that sense of a way of looking at yourself, your experience, through the lens of impermanence. The breath coming and going. Feelings, emotions, thoughts, sounds, tastes, smells. Coming, staying for a while and passing. Is it possible to see the unsatisfactoriness even in the pleasant experiences? That these don't last either. They come and go. None of it can be clung to, held on to. Something difficult or unpleasant comes up. Can you see this as not me, not mine? but rather a coming together of conditions, memories, thoughts, feelings, sensations. Perhaps coming to manifest or constellate as sadness or grief or anger. Can you see this as conditions rather than me or mine? Not me, not mine. Can looking at your experience through these three characteristics provide some letting go, some ease, easing of contraction? You might explore these ways of looking at your experience. Changing, unsatisfactory, not me, not mine. And it may be that one or two of these ways of looking might resonate more with you, might feel more productive. Just see what works, what helps for you, if any. This is Seas, S-E-A-S, by Juan Ramon Jimenez, a Spanish poet. I have a feeling that my boat has struck down there in the depths against a great thing, and nothing happens. Nothing. Silence. Waves. Nothing happens, or has everything happened? And are we standing now quietly in the new life? Nothing happens, or has everything happened? And are we standing now quietly in the new life? So Rich asks in the chat, is the Eightfold Path a source of judgment of ourselves and others? The Eightfold Path is a source of training, acknowledging that all of us need to train our minds if we're going to untangle ourselves from suffering. It's the nature, of the habitual conditioned mind to get caught up in suffering, to get caught up in clinging and aversion and delusion and all sorts of things. So it's not a problem, it's not a thing that we should blame ourselves or others for these patterns, but rather to see them and transform them. And that really is what the path is for. It's a very, I find this path a very non-judgmental one, that judgment, the kind of aversive judgment, and I distinguish that from judgment in a discerning way, an insightful, clear kind of judgment. This is wrong. That can be a very discerning judgment. What I'm talking about is more an aversive type kind of judgment, a clinging kind of judgment. In Buddhist teachings, this is seen really as just another form of aversion. It's unhelpful because it just reinforces that sense of separation. Oh, I'm bad. Oh, they're bad. It solidifies things. So it's not, yes, remorse can be important and helpful and necessary as a way of, to go forward in a more compassionate or helpful way, but not the kind of judgment that's kind of creates separation. And so the Eightfold Path is really a path of training to open our hearts and to untangle ourselves from suffering. What I think I will do, just given time today, is I'll definitely save the chat, and if there's some questions there, I'll come back to them next time. Share a few upcoming activities that I have. I think I've posted them there on the chat. Yeah, in the chat. I have a retreat coming up with Rebecca, my partner, in Ireland next summer, June 18th to 25th. Check that out if that might be something that interests you. I'm really looking forward to teaching in Ireland. And then we got a couple of retreats coming up of weekends. The first one is online on the heart practices of loving kindness and compassion, equanimity, joy. And that's July 9th to 11th. And the one in October is our first in-person retreat since the pandemic, so for more than a year and a half now, and that's at a center about an hour and a half out of town in Lower PA in Pennsylvania, and it's supposedly a really nice retreat center. So if you're looking for a retreat back in person, October 1st through 3rd, check those out. And I do want to mention, I don't have the link handy right now, but in the fall, I'm doing an 8-week class on the Noble Eightfold Path, the path of training in meditation, wisdom, and ethics. And it's a really central area of the Buddhist teachings. So that'll begin on September 20th, and it'll go for 8 weeks till November 8th. So if you're interested, I'll be sending out some more notices on that.